A Strange Pedestal. Nightingale gingerly picked her way through the hall, being careful not to make a sound. A pair of massive double doors blocked the way, made of wood so old it seemed halfway petrified. Someone was shouting from within. Nightingale felt lucky that the intruder was making enough of a racket to find in the dim light. Nightingale was certain it was the thief. Who else would be down in the vaults? She peeked through the partly open double doors and leaned around the edge of the doorway so she wouldn't alert the thief to her presence. Upon seeing what was in the room, Nightingale immediately froze. She fought back the urge to scream, which turned halfway into a gag as she stared at the abomination that filled the center of the room. It looked like a head 30 feet tall with skin rotting and pale. Strands of matted, oily hair clung to its clammy flesh, and grasping limbs sprouted from random points along the scalp. They were like dozens of thick arms and fingers that writhed like a centipede that had been cut in half with a shovel. The room was large and mostly devoid of furnishings, except for some sort of pedestal that sat on the far side of the grotesque monstrosity. "I have the right of salvage!" A man stood with his back to her, separating her from the monster. Nightingale mused that this must be the thief. He was attempting to claim whatever was on the pedestal behind the horrible creature. He sounded far more confident than she would have been. "You can't stop me!" The creature laughed, throwing back a jaw that hinged open to reveal more appendages. Every pale digit had become a row of glittering teeth. It wasn't laughter as ever Nightingale had known it before. It was like the last breath of the dying, shifted octaves lower and much louder. "I am Hografar, Lord of the Vaults. I have right to every treasure here." "Not this one," the thief said, stepping forward. Curiosity fought against her fear, and Nightingale moved closer to get a better look at what the thief was trying to steal. Atop the pedestal, she could see a rather benign-looking shard of rock. Its faint glow reflected a red hue from the cushion it was on. It looked as if it was placed deliberately, but by whom she didn't know. "You have no use for such an artifact," the thief started yelling now. "Let me pass, and I'll make it worth your while." The creature Hographer furrowed its obscene brow as if contemplating the offer. Then something tumbled across the ground. Nightingale accidentally kicked a stone across the floor, and the creature looked in her direction, its single gigantic eye fixing on her. Her heart seized in her chest as the monster's apparent amusement turned to anger. "Coward! You couldn't face me alone? This thief is less than a worm." It raised one of its massive tooth-filled mouths at the end of an elongated finger as thick as Rook's torso. Nightingale tensed. "Get back!" Her shout came too late. There was a harsh tearing sound like she might have heard in a butcher's shop as Hographer ripped open the man's belly. Blood sprayed through the air with an audible gurgle. The thief fell. "No!" Her body moved on instinct, and before she knew what was happening, she was sprinting towards his limp figure. "Get away from him!" Her friends jumped into action as well. She felt a surge of pride filling her, knowing that she hadn't been abandoned. The monster swept aside their blows like it might an annoying insect. Their attacks slid like water from its hide without effect. Rook went slamming backward as a massive finger knocked the air from his lungs and sent him tripping over himself. Remy and Zeke weren't far behind, each sent flying with casual ease. Nightingale charged, leaping with her weapon outstretched, but it caught her in midair with a swipe, smacking her across the middle and tossing her through the air like a child's toy. She was only dimly aware of striking the ground. Her weapon was sent spinning out of her grip as she slid to a stop. Behind her, the sound of cruel laughter echoed through the chamber. Nightingale didn't lie still for very long. She felt her tail twitch, her limbs spasming one at a time as she regained control. Gurgling breaths came from somewhere so close she could almost feel the heat. Nightingale fought the pain, forcing herself to sit up. The world was still spinning, but it was clear enough to see what had happened. The monstrous Hographer knocked her towards the injured thief. There was more blood than Nightingale had ever seen in her life. It pooled on the ground around him. The torn threads of his shirt mixed freely with the wound. For a moment, time stood still as she tried to process the image. She crawled weakly forward along the ground, reaching the thief. "I'm coming," she squeaked, her voice coming out in a slur. She clawed her way through the grime, fumbling through her gear with one shaking hand. "Damn you! Get away from me!" He coughed, blood pouring from his lips as he tried to shove her vainly away with one hand. "Get away!" Nightingale ignored him. The man was obviously in shock. He didn't know what he was saying, and there was no chance she would listen. "I'll stop the bleeding or something," She searched desperately for the source of the blood pooling from his wound. She pushed but couldn't manage enough pressure to do anything but cover her hands in warm, thick fluid. The man's skin was pale, his insides open and exposed. Every second brought another pulse of blood, some splattering on her bare skin. Get away! The man's breathing was slowing to a dull rattle. He pushed on one of her legs, but the gesture was as futile as her attempt to stem the blood. "I'll help you," she insisted again, leaning closer. There was probably healing magic for a wound this terrible, magic that someone who'd actually earned a spot in the demiurge would know. Malum. The word came out in a hoarse rattle, bubbles foaming at the thief's mouth as he gasped. He suddenly shook one last time, then finally fell still. Nightingale watched him die. There was a moment of silence. She didn't notice that her friends were still stunned from their blows. She didn't think about the horrible monster behind her. Nothing made sense as she stared down at the body. Then something started to hiss and bubble in front of her. The corpse wasn't still. Something darker than blood seemed to be leaking from his face. Nightingale pushed away from him, blood still coating her arms and soaking into her clothes. A few moments proved the tar-like ooze was not leaking. It was clawing its way out, pouring out of the man's mouth and piling up atop him. It surged from behind his eyes, out his ears, and out the pores in his skin. She only had a second to see it. The black mass sloshed about within itself, and with each movement, strange lights flickered from within. It had dozens of eyes, no two alike in size or shape. They seemed to move freely, pointing directly at objects instead of pivoting to face them. Within a second, they were all pointing at her. Nightingale tried to scream as the thing surged towards her. She put her arms up, but it didn't hinder the ooze at all. It had no limbs, yet the whole thing latched onto her face like the malicious pseudopod of a feeding amoeba. Fierce cold boiled at her skin where it touched, so cold it burned. Her scream choked in her throat as the monster pried her jaws open wider, filling her mouth. The seeping tar sucked into her eyes and she could feel the pressure of it pushing into her skull. The pain was overwhelming, screaming throughout her body. The darkness consumed her vision and her mind until consciousness faded. Rook moaned. Despite the pain making every movement stiff, he knew he had to act. The creature was still here, and it could easily kill him. He had to get up. He had to help his friends. He rose, grunting. In the darkness, his surroundings seemed to blur, yet one shape formed before the others. It was Hographer, looming in the murky shadows. Far worse, it was holding Nightingale in the air by one of her horns. Rook couldn't speak, instead fumbling for his weapon. He didn't dare do anything sudden, lest he startle the monster into killing his friend. Hographer held Nightingale very near between two grotesque fingers, inspecting her closely. "Where did you go? Acquired a new host? Perhaps trying to hide inside of another body?" It was searching Nightingale's face with a massive eye. Rook tensed, readying for a vain attempt at an attack. After a few seconds, the monster started laughing again, and Nightingale shook vigorously in its grasp. "Damned fool," Hographer called, voice so loud that the ground seemed to shake. "She just saved my life from that parasite." Hographer seemed to be smiling through the appendages leaking from its mouth. Rook had no time for rational thought. He charged, crossing the room far faster than his size made him look capable of, lifting a massive weapon in both hands. Hographer didn't see him coming, nor did it turn towards the sound of Rook's pounding steps. Rook struck as hard as he could, aiming straight for the joint on one of the creature's fingers. The half-rotten flesh parted, spraying foul-smelling slime. Hographer screamed, its voice sounding continually shriller as it went. Nightingale landed with a sick-sounding thump at Rook's feet. Rook didn't slow as he scooped her into his arms, leaning towards the smallest, shortest door in the room. "Follow me," Rook bellowed towards Zeke and Remy. Despite their recent beating, the two were both on their feet and weren't far behind him. They ran for their lives. Rook couldn't have said where he went. At each fork and junction, he picked a direction at random, so long as the way through looked clear. The ground shook behind them, and Hographer's terrible screeching still sounded in his ears. Rook ran until his guts started to ache, oblivious to anything but the placement of his feet and Nightingale in his arms. The sound of pursuit faded to a distant echo, and only then they could stop. Rook dropped to his knees, lowering Nightingale to the ground in front of him. Zeke was first to speak, his voice so casual it sounded forced. Did either of you catch the way we came? No. Remy dropped to the ground beside Rook, nudging at Nightingale's cheek with one hand. To Rook's great surprise, Nightingale started coughing. She whimpered like an injured animal. Her eyes opened, and for a quick instant they seemed cloudy. What happened? She moaned. Are you all right? Rook asked, his voice low. Are you kidding? Nightingale shook her head once as though trying to shake water out of her ears. What the hell was on that pedestal that was worth fighting a monster like that? And what was that horrific dark creature that came out of the dead thief? Everyone gave her a strange look before Rook asked. Something came out of the thief? What do you mean something came out of the thief? I only saw the giant head hographer. Nightingale shook her head trying to remember, but it was all a blur. Oh God, I'm not sure. Yeah, well, we have bigger problems to worry about now. Zeke gestured around the little room, some kind of old storage area off the main hall by the look of it. We're lost. I was trying to keep track of where we went, but I don't have a goddamn clue anymore. That thing... We get it, Remy sighed. This place goes down as deep as the towers go high. That's what they say. Thousands and thousands of rooms, and at least one of them has a gigantic monster that's probably looking for us right now. Zeke offered Nightingale his hand and helped her stand. She swayed on her feet, but only a little. You've got any smart ideas, Rook? Zeke pulled what looked like his last crumpled cigarette out. Rook sighed. I've got one idea, but you guys have to be cool about it. Nobody freak out. Nobody freak out? Nightingale still looked drained, but there were a few bright twinges around her cheeks. You serious, Rook? After meeting... what did it call itself? Hographer? Okay, right. He reached up to his neck and removed the amulet that hung there. Suri? He didn't say it so much as he thought it, calling out through the strange amulet with focused will to a place he never should have touched. Yes, Rook? As usual, the answering voice came almost instantly, created from nothing, yet audible by everyone nearby. You sound upset. I am, Rook said to the empty air all around them. Do you have the strength to manifest now? The reply came with a little reproach. There are 3 others in the room with you. When we first spoke, I told you my kind was forbidden in your world and both of us would be in great danger if your kind learned of our friendship. Rook glanced once at each of his friends in turn, Nightingale still looking like she'd been wrung out, Zeke forcing himself to be calm, and Remy was shaking with nervous fear. He sighed. I trust them, Suri. We need your help. As you wish. Light began to glow from the amulet, a magenta that overwhelmed the gloom and grew bright enough to radiate through the open doorways around them. Rook was numb to the wonder by now, though he couldn't miss the shocked expressions his friends had as the light grew so bright it seemed to take solid form. Rook knew little of Suri. Every time they'd been together, she had taken this shape, greenish and vaguely human, with a body of radiant energy that blurred into swirling light the lower you looked. Her hair was electric blue and waved as though in an invisible wind. Whoa! Zeke's cigarette hung limply from his mouth as his eyes widened. Hi! Suri bounced on nothing, though she never got more than a few feet from Rook. The amulet continued to glow, though it had dimmed down to something far more tolerable. Everybody, this is Suri. Rook waved towards his friends as he introduced them. The spirit darted, a little nearer to each one as he named them, examining each from head to foot. She didn't offer to shake hands or anything else similarly polite. How did... Rook cut Zeke off with a tired gesture. Later, he turned, fixing his eyes on the glowing spirit. Suri, we're completely lost down here. Can you help us find a way out? Remy gasped as Suri vanished. Did she just leave us? She said with a concerned look. Rook shook his head. It's complicated to explain. If she left us, the amulet wouldn't be glowing. Before he could explain further, Suri returned in a bright flash of purple light. I found the way, Suri grinned, pointing with one hand at a nearby open door. A glowing trail formed in that direction. Best get moving.